in which case I don't think that is showing on the screen right now.